Hey there, this is Dani reporting in for my Nursing 4113 class, assignment part 3A, Cultural Diversity Assessment. I've chosen to create a full-on interview for my cultural assessment, and I apologize now for my bad humor throughout, but the person I have chosen to interview is extremely knowledgeable about her culture, and I truly hope that you can walk away from this video with a bit more practical nursing knowledge regarding my population of choice, the Blackfoot First Nations people. Hello and welcome to the Dani Show! Today on the Dani Show, Amelia Crowshoe, former Stampede Princess, and my best friend. Both of each other. Sweet. Alright everyone, let's get started. So, today on the Dani Show, we have Amelia Crowshoe. Hello Amelia.
Hello Dani.
Hi. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
This is very special. Excuse me. My chair's really wiggly. This is very special. Contrary to popular belief, Dani does go to school. She's in nursing, and this is a project that we are interviewing for a cultural diversity nursing class. So last week on the Dani Show, well, you know, the chocolate chip incident. But this week we're going into a little bit more of an intellectual side of things, and we'll be interviewing Amelia on her culture and how nurses can provide culturally competent care in order to provide the best care. Amelia, tell us about yourself.
Well, I am 25 years old. I'm from the N4113 Nation. I lived in Calgary for more than 10 years of my life, and I currently work at an organization that manages First Nations data surveys, one of which is the Regional Health Survey, which is the first longitudinal health survey for First Nations people.
The first longitudinal survey?
Yeah, health survey. So it came out of the Aboriginal Peoples Survey, which was done in the early 2009, and then from there they decided that they didn't have any kind of real data on First Nations people in terms of health. So they began the RHS, which is the Longitudinal Health Survey, and it's been going on for about, I don't know, 6-9 years or something like that. And so that's the work that we do at my center, and now we're launching a new survey for First Nations people in Alberta who are living on reserve, and that's called the First Nations Early Childhood Education and Employment Survey.
Wow, that sounds really impressive. Coincidence? I think not. I picked Amelia because she's very smart, and I'm very interested in her culture. As you can tell, Amelia is very involved with her culture and plays her part in order to contribute to the overall health for her people. The cultural assessment model I will be using for this interview is based on my previous review of diversity care models, and I will be using a combination of both of the following models to complete this assessment. So Amelia, could you tell us a little bit more about the Piikani Nation?
The Piikani Nation is the smallest nation of the Blackfoot Confederacy, and it's located in between Fort Macleod and Pincher Creek. The membership is about 3,600 people, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
Nice, nice. Now I do know one word in Blackfoot. Oki. I should have used that to welcome you because it means hello in Blackfoot, correct?
Correct. And you have a Blackfoot name too.
I do, I know. I'll try and pronounce it right. Apinakwe Pinoka.
That's very good.
I try. And what's your Blackfoot name?
Miss Memonizaki.
Do you have any medical conditions that were required you to access regular healthcare services?
Yes, I do. I have type 1 diabetes, so it's important for me to go every 6 months and get my checkup and, you know, keep on track of things. My dietitian and my nurse.
That sounds like a great interdisciplinary relationship. Haha. Oh yeah. How do you feel their care towards you relates to your culture, and does it not? Do they recognize it? Do they ask you questions? How is that relationship in terms of cultural care?
It's actually a lot better at the Elbow River Healing Lodge because their whole focus is providing care for First Nations people. I was with my doctor before, and I just didn't really feel comfortable there. I don't know why, I just needed a change, and now I find it more comfortable. I don't know, because they're more culturally competent and they realize that I'm First Nations, and it's easier to talk to like a First Nations nurse than it is for some reason a non-native nurse for me. So
Yes, that's a very good point. Now, your grandpa was telling me how it's hard for people to validate, or First Nations healers to validate their accreditations as healers versus a doctor who goes to university to get his or her doctorate. What are your thoughts on the validation of Native healers?
It's a whole process. When you go to a Native healer, they have traditional rites of passage and knowledge that have been validated by the community through our ceremonies. So when you get a transferred rite, is what we call them, everyone's there to see you get that transferred rite. So it's kind of like graduating, like walking the stage. Everyone knows. And they get a song for the plants that they use, or they get a song for that transferred rite that was given to them, and that song is the authority. So if they go and they sing that song, then you know in front of everybody that they have the rights to perform the healing and they have the rights to that ceremony. So we come from an oral culture where validation is, we spoken, and the transfer of knowledge is passed down by word of mouth. So these public displays of transferred rights are very important to us. So it would be the equivalency of getting your diploma or your degree.
Fascinating, truly fascinating. From this segment, we have learned that Amelia has type 1 diabetes, so she requires regular access to care, but feels she receives better care from First Nations healthcare providers. She also mentioned a special nursing consideration for the Blackfoot people, that they come from an oral culture, and so things like validation of being a traditional healer versus being a Western medicine doctor can sometimes be misunderstood. Welcome back to the Dani Show. Today we have with us Amelia Crowshoe. Continuing on, Amelia, how have your experiences been with the healthcare system so far for you and your family?
Well, my mom's a nurse, so she's always on top of it. But I mean, for myself, I've kind of found it hard to find a doctor that I've been comfortable with, or a healthcare team that I've been comfortable with. And a lot of the attitudes, especially with my diabetes, is like, well, you know that you're First Nations and you're at higher risk and all these other stuff. So it's kind of like they put it on me, and then I'm like, okay, well, what does that mean, But a lot of preconceived notions. I wouldn't say all healthcare providers, but most of them, especially with First Nations people. And First Nations people are, a lot of the elders too are adverse to seeking treatment before like later stages, like in cancer or diabetes and stuff. They'll wait till the very last possible second day of care. So.
And why do you think this? Is this a cultural belief, or is it because, they might be concerned about accessing healthcare because of that stigma, or?
There are various number of reasons why First Nations people don't get access to care. For number one, like when you take cancer, for instance, we're doing a partnership with Cancer Pathways from my organization, and we found that a lot of First Nations people, when you transfer the word cancer into, say, Blackfoot, it means a completely different connotation, and it's really scary for them because it refers to something that is low-lying under the grass that kind of sneaks up on you. Like, it's a very terrifying thought, right? And so when people talk about cancer, there's a great taboo around it just because of the language barrier. And then on top of that, a lot of First Nations people live in remote communities, so they don't have access to healthcare. They can't get to the major centers to get treatment, to seek treatment options. And a lot of the practitioners in those communities are general, right? So, and sometimes they're overwhelmed with patients because, it's a small community, and once a doctor gets out there, it's like a long list, right? So there are various reasons. And another is the mistrust. You have elderly people who have been through residential school, people who are still in their 40s who experience residential school, and the amount of trauma from an institution like residential school, it really builds mistrust between First Nations people and healthcare institutions and education institutions and government institutions because of what happened to us, and we're still trying to overcome that, right? So there's a lot of different reasons why people don't get access to healthcare, or they refuse to go until it's until it's advanced, right? So.
Right. Okay, lots. A couple comments in terms of, I guess, would you say that these biological variations in terms of your culture, you said that Native Blackfoot people are more susceptible to diabetes. How do you think the rest of your culture, or the people of your culture, kind of walk around living with that, and how does that affect their health care?
I think a lot of it is denial because, like I said, Native people aren't exactly open with, non-Native practitioners in their community are outsiders, so it's kind of hard, that method of communication, just because of the mistrust I talked about. And also a lot of people will just be in denial. Like, I know that it's a scary thing for First Nations people. I mean, in some communities there's so much going on that, you know, health isn't always a priority.
Right.
So, you know, a lot of the people living in these communities are underneath, well below the poverty line, and they're just trying to survive. So they don't have access to, you know, healthy foods, or they don't have access to transportation, or they can barely, you know, keep their utilities and rent going. And so a lot of these factors kind of build into that kind of denial, or not even having enough time to administer self-care to themselves. Right.
As you can tell from this segment of The Dani Show, I didn't have to ask very many questions to get a handful of answers from Amelia. She is very insightful and touched on many aspects of her experience with care. She was able to nicely identify one of the principles of primary health care, access to health, and pointed out several different barriers from her cultural standpoint. She also mentioned biases and preconceived notions that tend to be reflected upon her when accessing healthcare. Understanding and recognizing our biases is a major part of this nursing course, and was also identified by Amelia as something to consider during everyday nursing practice. These are very important nursing considerations that can be applied to practice in order to better understand the Blackfoot population. Oh yeah, yes, that's very good insight, Amelia. So I guess that would translate to really upstream thinking in the nursing world, and thinking about not just the acute problem, but what we can do as particularly community health nurses to look into other things, other factors that are maybe barriers towards accessing healthcare for Blackfoot people. I know this might be a really big question for you, Amelia, but just considering what we just talked about, and the cultural differences and how things translate differently in the Blackfoot language, how would you think, or what could you maybe, the advice you could give to healthcare workers or nurses in particular, on how to kind of step back and consider that cultural aspect? What advice would you give to healthcare providers?
That is a big question, because it's a whole shift in worldview, and I think the most important thing when you come to any cross-cultural communication or interactions with people, I mean, you just don't know, right? Like, you don't know what's appropriate and you don't know what to ask, but the important thing is to have an open mind and be respectful of other perspectives that have that validation. Could be completely.
Absolutely. So could you tell me maybe a couple things off the top of your head that are maybe, would you say, like taboo, or kind of things that, in terms of the world of healthcare, like things that you wouldn't use, or things that you would use, or remedies, or anything like that, that's kind of that healthcare providers should know perhaps when dealing with the Blackfoot population?
In terms of the Blackfoot population, things that I can think of is like touch, where if you're going to touch somebody, it's like a very powerful thing. That's a connection for us, right? So you have to be very respectful of that, especially with like elders and such, and you know, just let them know what you're going to do ahead of time and make sure that they're aware of it. Because some people, not all First Nation, not all people, not all Blackfoot people are like that. A lot of people are comfortable with it, because you know, when you're going to the doctor, obviously that's going to happen. But I mean, some people, of course, are very sensitive to that. And then what I think is really great is the holistic aspect of our culture. So when we talk about, you know, being healthy and taking care of our illness, that goes like, you know, your emotional illness, your emotional health, and then your physical health as well. They go hand in hand. So we always try to think positive, and we always say give it up to Creator. So we take ourselves, we cleanse ourselves, and we just give it back to Creator so that He can take care of us, and we continue trying hard to be healthy, right? So keeping that mindset. And then for Blackfoot people, like traditional herbs and stuff, when we get sick, when we have a cold, my grandma makes a special brew from these, you know, remedies that she received from my great-grandparents and, you know, their great-grandparents before them. And those things do work for us because just, you know, there's natural ways of healing yourself. And so keeping that in mind, there's a lot of studies being done now on the validation of our traditional knowledge in healthcare, right? So there's plenty of resources out there that could provide us with support in addition to Western medicine, right? So those can both work hand in hand, and it doesn't have to be like one or the other. So.
Tell me about other things like perhaps eye contact, space, the culture of time, what time means in your culture, those kind of things.
Well, in terms of time, I know that there's like this thing that everyone calls Indian time where you're at least like half an hour late. And I know it happens, but the common,
happens to everyone, really.
yeah, but the common thought around that for our people is like you will get there when you get there, right? Like as long as you get there, that's the most important thing. So that's what we try to focus on. And you know, not all First Nations people are going to be running on Indian time, but you know, sometimes it does happen, and it just comes from a different worldview, like a different expectation of the world that we live in, right? So sometimes that happens, and sometimes, you know, if something with family comes up, that's always more important because we always think of our community before we think of ourselves. You know, that's always been a traditional thought of ours. And so if something like that happens, that will take precedence over an appointment you have or a doctor's, you know, stuff like that. So that's important to keep in mind. And in terms of other like cultural taboos, traditionally we believe you don't make eye contact with elders or people who you respect. And so you'll find that not a lot of First Nations people are very direct with their eye contact. And sometimes that can mean a problem because if you're not aware of that, then you're thinking, okay, they might be hiding something from me, or you know, they're not looking me in the eye, something must be going on. But that's just part of our cultural teachings. You know, we never look people of authority in the eye because, you know, it's almost like a direct challenge to them. So.
Really, that's a really good point. Really good point to consider.
In this segment, we have identified several components of the transcultural model that cover things like time, space, and communication considerations of the Blackfoot people. But yet again, the theme of recognizing our biases is raised when considering eye contact, yet another important nursing consideration.
You mentioned family. So describe to me the role of family in terms of health and, you know, illness, and the importance of the family and what to expect, or what a nurse can expect to witness in terms of family operations.
First Nations families are very large. Like, we consider immediate family to be anywhere from like our mom, our grandparents, to like a first cousin or a second cousin. So our families are very, very large, and traditionally we would be disciplined by our aunts and uncles. Like our parents would take care of us, and then our aunts and uncles would discipline us because that was their role. Also, grandparents played a huge role in teaching us a lot about our traditional lifestyle. They would, you know, also discipline us. They would keep an eye on us and bring us to ceremonies and tell us what to do in ceremonies and pass on that traditional knowledge to us. And so that was quite important. And that's why you find like a lot of First Nations families are very large and they're all very involved in each other's lives. It's just because of those traditional structures, and that's how we grew up. And I find that once you can kind of reach one family member, a lot of that knowledge will spread because they'll be involved. So, for example, when I was diagnosed with diabetes, of course my mom knew what it was, but the rest of my family had no clue. And so by way of me being diagnosed, now my whole family is aware of what diabetes is, and they've all actively, when I was diagnosed, they all actively participated in the changing of our diet and supporting me and stuff like that. So I know our family wasn't the only one who did that, and that's a lot, you know, a case with a lot of other people too. So we're all very close.
That's incredible. A whole family changing and helping out one person of the family. Excuse me. All right, Amelia, I have a few more questions. Thank you. You're doing a fabulous job. We're learning so much. We were just recently talking about family, and we're just wondering, what are the other social, organizational, perhaps structures of your cultural that might affect access to healthcare for you or your family or anyone else in the Blackfoot culture?
I don't know if it would directly affect our access to health, but in terms of social organizations within our culture, traditionally we have like a society structure, and within our society structure, it's almost like age grade. You know, like how you go from elementary to high school and then on to post-secondary. Traditionally, in our ceremonial life, we had age grade society. So you would start as a little kid in a society, I think it was called the Little Bird Society, and from there the kids would learn, you know, how to sit in a teepee etiquette, how to behave in a ceremony, you know, proper ways of behaving in your community, speaking to your elders, our origin stories, where we come from, our creation stories. And then from there it would just move up into more advanced stages. And then there was the Brave Dog Society, which is a policing society. So they would make sure that people in the camp were safe. They would make sure that people in the camp behaved. They would get things together for our major ceremony, the Sundance. So they would choose a spot where we would have the Sundance, all that kind of stuff. And then from there, it graduates up into what we would consider like the PhDs of cultural societies, where you become a bundle holder. And a bundle holder is very important because these bundles are ceremonial objects we believe were given to us by the Creator, by animals to take care of us, to help us in our lives. So we go to the bundles when we have problems or when we need help, or if there's a conflict that we need resolved. We go to these bundles and make a vow to dance with the objects in the bundles so that we can heal ourselves or we can resolve whatever conflict in our lives. But now it's kind of different because of, residential school and the loss of the transfer of knowledge from elders to their children to their children because of, the intergenerational residual effects from residential school. They broke the oral line, right? They broke that oral tradition. And so we're still trying to mend those ways and continue those. But, those are kind of the cultural, traditional backgrounds where we come from. And accessing healthcare, you can imagine, having a nurse or a doctor come into your community and not knowing any of those things and kind of not being aware of the mistrust and not being aware of the culture. It can make it very difficult for communication to happen.
Absolutely.
And so to have that training, to have cultural competency training, just being aware of the general nuances in First Nations culture, because although we're very diverse across the country, we also share a lot of similarities as a result of our oral histories, right? So the practice is a little different, but the general idea is the same.
In this segment, we have learned that the societal structures in the Blackfoot culture are different, and in an ethnocentric way, different to what some would consider regular society. This is yet another nursing consideration when interacting with the people of this culture. Amelia also mentioned off-camera that nurses need to be engaged with current research that links healthcare providers and culturally competent care, and that the key is wanting to learn from other cultures and to work hard to become, in quote, the good nurse.
Take us through any variations or cultural considerations for providing care or accessing care in terms of gender identity or roles or differences or how that works in your culture.
Okay, so in the Blackfoot culture, men and women are considered equal. So when you think about, our whole idea generally is to lead a good life. It's essentially what we do to maintain healthy bodies, to maintain healthy communities, and to take care of our world so that our children and their children have a place after we're gone. So our train of thought is not, just me, it's everybody. And so when we think about leading a good life in the Blackfoot culture, that means that you have to have, you can't lead a good life without a woman, or you can't, as a woman, lead a good life without a man by your side in ceremonies, in your everyday life. So in terms of gender roles, men and women are considered equal. The woman is not subservient to the man isn't subservient to the woman, because without both you wouldn't be able to.
Do you think that the Blackfoot culture or people of your culture have adequate resources and have the access to resources, but have resources out there available? Do you think there are enough for you? Do you feel supported in Western medicine?
I would say definitely in the city I could seek those resources, but a lot of it is just I have to really search for them. And on the reserve, it's very limited because of funding agreements and money from Health Canada that comes to the reserve and allocating those dollars so that the programs are supported. And it's really hard because we're in a weird place right now where with things like I Don't Know More and people doing their own data management, First Nations really taking charge of self-determination and their own identity now. That's emerging in such a huge way that we're growing so fast, but yet we're still maintaining such an archaic system of relying on the government for these funding dollars, right? Because when they give us the money, it's, they tell us how to spend it essentially, right? So they say this much has to go here, this much has to go there, and then they have like this much to administer their own culturally competent First Nations run programs that support, health accessibility to programs, right? So it's a very difficult subject, especially on reserve, because it's so different there, right? And so I would think that if we could somehow meet in the middle and have a discussion or change the system in a way that is more open to us taking charge of the money that we do get,
Right.
and putting that towards, you know, programs that a lot of people have great ideas about how to take care of our community, and these are people who come from our community, right? And so to empower that, I think is really important, and I think that would probably be the main thing to think about.
Right, yeah, empowerment, advocacy, all these other things that you're saying, basically giving more opportunity to build capacity within the Blackfoot culture to take initiative for their own health, and put the money into resources that would benefit their own culture in their own way, because again, they are the experts. That's great, fascinating. We're going to take one more break and we'll be back right away.
In this segment, we touched on the important consideration that men and women both have equal and highly important roles in the Blackfoot society. The next focus was on relative resources for the people of Amelia's culture. She stressed that allocating government money to the right programs and resources for the First Nations people is difficult, but if nurses could understand these issues and begin to advocate for better use of money and avenues of empowerment, First Nations people can take their health more into their own hands. These concepts are part of yet another principle of primary healthcare, public participation, and community action. This would be a good example of applying and integrating this new nursing knowledge into the political scope of nursing, the scope that is often swept aside in this modern world of acute problems.
Thank you so much for helping me out with this project and
My pleasure.
learning me more about the cultures. So just in closing, I wanted to let you know about another article that's been helping me with my learning, and it's regarding the components of being culturally competent in nursing care. And there are 5 components. One, cultural awareness, cultural skill, cultural knowledge, cultural encounter, and the 5th is cultural desire. So I've particularly grown fond of the last one, cultural desire, and that basically is the desire of a healthcare provider to want to go and dive headfirst into a culture, and not just be an outsider or a bystander, you know, ask those regular questions, but to really have the desire to become involved in a culture and want to learn about it and really brush up on their skills so that they can provide the best possible care. What do you think about my description of cultural desire, Amelia?
I think it's awesome. I think we should all be desirous of other cultures and just jump in and get going with it.
Indubitably. So, on that note, Amelia, what can you do to help me become more culturally desirous?
Well, I'm a jingle dress dancer, and I could teach you how to jingle dress dance
Really?
if you'd like to.
All right, let's get to it.
In this last segment, you witnessed my description of the 5th construct in the process of cultural competence in the delivery of healthcare services. This is said to be the most difficult construct to achieve given the other components of this model, but it complements the quote, "Nurses will not ever be culturally competent, yet always becoming." With this in mind, follow me as I begin in the rigorous training process in becoming a champion jingle dress dancer.
Okay, you want to dance? Okay, so start like this, and then just have your feet forward. Okay? And then if you want to get fancy, just shuffle to the beat.
Okay. I think I got it. Yay! Thanks, Amelia!
You're welcome.
Yay! This has been the Dani Show. See you next week.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed the show and have gained some insight of the Blackfoot culture. In conclusion, we have learned that there are several very important nursing considerations when dealing with First Nations people. From communication and mistrust to the role of family, health priorities, and government funding, all of these concepts need to be taken into consideration in order to understand the people of this culture and to provide the best care that meets their needs and not the needs that we may think that they need. Taking time to understand a culture Drawing parallels between cultural concerns and models like the principles of primary healthcare is one way to close the gap between culturally diverse populations and everyday nursing. Setting aside biases, wanting to learn from other cultures, and taking initiative in your own nursing practice to assess, plan, implement, and evaluate your actions towards always becoming culturally competent is where to start. Thanks again for watching, and see you next time.